Hey, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from around the world, inspiration continues. See, who am I meeting to? A professional speaker, inspiration, humor coach, a mentor to many, Mr. Scott.
Mr. Scott Friedman, you got it. Hi, nice to meet you.
Please tell about yourself to everyone who is listening to you. Who are you? How long have you been speaking and inspiring many people's lives?
So I've met Cavett Robert. Cavett Robert founded the National Speakers Association 40 years ago, and he became my first mentor. He told me I had a unique style, I should be a professional speaker. At the time, I didn't realize he said that to everybody. So by then, it was too late. I became a professional speaker. I started when I was 25. I've been doing it now for 33 years. That makes me older, I guess, huh?
Wow.
Anyway, so I was a member of Toastmasters some years back, and but became a professional speaker actually before I became a Toastmaster, interestingly enough. And I'm an author. The book that would apply to speakers, I wrote a book called Happily Ever Laughter, How to Engage Any Audience.
All right.
The market defined me as a motivational humorist, and I use a lot of humor in my programs. Humor is the vehicle to get my message across.
Indeed, indeed.
And so that way people will pay more attention to you. And but I've in the 33 years I've been speaking, I've written 5 books, and I now spend about 110 days a year in Southeast Asia, maybe 20 in the Middle East, Gulf region, and the rest in
I'm very glad.
America.
I'm very glad to share small stage with you.
Very glad to share with you too. Thanks for
You're
asking.
so humble. You're so humble.
How do you know?
I can make out.
How you can tell?
And I have to tell you
Okay.
one thing. You have a great voice.
Thank you.
Vocals.
I think so. You have to speak slow and enunciate and pretend that there's a comma after every word, so that way that you pronounce every word. I think that's very important.
Is it something to be, something can be learned, or it is God gifted?
The comma afterwards, or just the voice itself? Yeah, if you just put a comma, you just learned it right there.
It's learnable skill.
Yeah, no, I think I had a decent voice to start with, but it definitely you learn how to project and learn how to speak from here and bring it forward. Yes.
All right, Mrs. Scott, you have a very charming, towering personality. Is it required
Really?
to become a great speaker, or even people like me who can become great speakers?
Yeah, I think you need to work on your charm a little bit before you can become a great speaker. But I think you got possibility. No, I'm just kidding. You're looking at me like, oh.
No, it's okay. I'm taking it.
No.
Guys, just watch it. Listen very carefully.
I think a likability factor is important in speaking. You don't have to. Really, to make it as a professional speaker, there's really 2 keys. Number 1, you have to have a message, a relevant message that people will pay you for, and number 2, you have to be able to market that message. So,
Message according to the market.
yeah, so it's a relevant message. So it's you could have an expertise in something, but there's not a big enough market, or people won't pay you for it. So, when people say, "Well, I want to become a professional speaker," so how do you become a professional speaker? So what is the market looking for? How can you become an expert at something that people will pay you for?
All right, thank you. One more similar question. There are many people who are struggling. They are good speakers. They are speaking, but they are struggling to become paid speaker. How they can become paid speaker?
Well, we talked a little while ago about Darren LaCroix. So Darren, I love to quote Darren, especially in Toastmasters audiences: stage time, stage time, stage time. Dale Carnegie said the difference between a good speaker and a great speaker is 1,000 speeches. So if people want to become a professional speaker, then speak. Get out there and speak. And
No
then
matter how you speak.
Well, yes, just because you want to get in front of a group, you want to look into their eyes and find out what they respond to. And then, so 2 things happen. Number 1, you'll find out what the audience wants from you. And number 2, you'll find out what you're passionate about. Because when you're up in front of an audience, then all of a sudden something will hit, and you'll start talking, and you're like, oh, that's good. So you tape your speeches, and then you go back and you listen to those speeches, and you find what resonates with you, and you find out what resonates with your audience, and then you figure out, can you make a living doing that?
Perfect.
Yeah, and then
Thank you so much. Mr. Scott, one more question. One of your most embarrassing moment as a speaker, if you would like to share. Why? Because we all face such moments and we have such phases in our lives. How did you come back from that if you had experienced any moment as such which is embarrassing? You felt, it's not going to work.
You know, I take a fair amount of risks when I speak in writing humor because I try to be relevant to the audience. So there's, it doesn't always work. I think actually the most embarrassing moment ever was when I was inappropriate. I learned a good lesson at a young age when I was poking fun at somebody for using kind of some standard humor lines that were not appropriate. Like, what were those lines? But basically, I was teasing somebody about fooling around or something, and it turned out the guy that I was teasing was having an affair, and so it was the joke hit too close to home, and it just created a stir. And what I learned from that lesson or from that experience was to if you're ever going to poke fun at anybody in an audience, number one, make sure that they know you run it by them first.
All right.
And number two, anytime that anybody in the audience gets hurt or that you're poking fun at somebody, you're so much better using self-effacing humor, bringing the humor back on you. That's really the highest form of humor, is the ability to laugh at yourself. The lowest form of humor is making somebody else the target of a joke.
All right, thank you so much. Guys, the reason why I ask this question is normally we face such things, or we do such mistakes unintentionally. That's the reason I ask, is it normal or not? Is it human or not? It is human. We do such mistakes, and it's ourselves. We need to learn from that mistake and come back and not to repeat such mistakes, isn't it? Right? We can consider that because we are not here to disappoint people, but to make them feel good. All right, Mr. Scott, what message would you like to give to the people to gain confidence in order to become confident speakers, to come on stage, something so they can keep these lines in their mind, in their heart, every time they go on stage or before going to stage, they can remember these lines. Mrs. Scott has mentioned that one. This is what these lines made Mrs. Scott, and this is what they are going to help us. Please.
Well, that's a big calling right there. Wow. I think to remember, if you look at, for those listening, who you admire and respect the most that are good speakers, my guess would be they have three things in common, and I find these three things. And if you can come from these three places when you're speaking, you will dramatically become a better speaker. Number one is authenticity.
Okay.
Be who you are. Don't try to, you see somebody else and they say, oh man, that's a good line, that would be good for me. Be true to yourself. Be authentic. Number one. Number two, be vulnerable. Be able to. People would much rather hear about how you became successful or how your story through your failures.
Absolutely, I agree.
And when you're sharing your failures, tell it in such a way that people see their own lives and it makes immediate connection with the audience.
All right.
And the third is humility. Some speakers think they need to be, oh my gosh, this hero out there. Just be humble. Just be a good person on and off the platform, and by sharing when it didn't work so well, and being humble about it, that's another immediate connector. So authenticity, vulnerability, and humility.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Scott. You're doing a great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for inspiring
asking.
so many people. Guys, inspiration continues from around the world. If you have not subscribed my channel yet, to receive more motivation, more inspiration from the globe, do subscribe right now, because I'm going to bring every great person right in front of you, speaking for you, making you feel comfortable. And on top of everything, don't forget to take care of yourself.